Welcome back to Kings of Columbus. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. And Bill, we are here to sort of uh, put something down for posterity. We have been doing a best player draft for the Buckeyes. We did it in the preseason. We did it after week 4, after Ohio State beat Notre Dame. We did it after week 11, which was kind of like leading into a little bit, getting ready for the Michigan game. And we want to get it down now. But the bigger discussion we want to have is, was the talent level for Ohio State in 2023 where it needed to be? And once upon a time, after Quinn Ewers committed to Ohio State, I said that Ohio State's 2023 team had the chance to be the greatest team in college football history. You say things. You say things. Nobody remembers it. It doesn't matter. Nobody holds you accountable. Nobody makes fun of you.
You said chance. You didn't say definitely would.
No.
So that protects you.
If you say chance, say anything.
Yeah.
And so on one hand, it's like, well, how could I say back then, which is, it's based off the 2021 recruiting class, like they have a chance. And then now we're like, I don't know. Don't know if they had enough good players. I think there is something in there, though. And this continues the discussion that we're going to have a million times over the course of the offseason about roster building in the North, about elite players versus overall team strength, about how strong are your strong links versus how weak are your weak links. I'm fascinated by all of this and how different types of teams in the North go about building rosters. So we're going to have it on Kings of Columbus today to some degree. We're going to have it on Kings of the North a lot in the offseason. But first, what we're going to do is draft. We're going to draft the 22 best players for Ohio State. We have sort of how the players went up and down the list in the previous 3 drafts. And we're going to rip through this a little bit because I want to do the bigger talent level of play analysis sort of after the fact. And I don't know if I told you this, by the way. I'm going first this time, and I'm taking Marvin Harrison Jr. because part of my question is, I'm not sure I know who Ohio State's second best player was. So I'm not going to have to answer that question. Okay. You are. Sorry, not sorry.
Wow, that's really kind of you. I appreciate you putting all of that on me. It is. I don't know either. I think there's probably 4 maybe that you could pick from.
But before you go, and I said we're going to rip through this.
Yeah.
Did you find it interesting at all? And listen, we're actually running into this a little bit right now. I never change what I think. I change what I say based on my audience. I change what I say based on, and I don't mean like what I don't change my opinion. It's the opinions that I choose to express that I change based on the audience. And so this is, I understand this. This is, you and I have been talking Ohio State football forever. And now we have a whole entire show, Kings of the North, where we're not talking only Ohio State. Ohio State's part of that discussion. But on that show, we're trying to talk to Michigan fans and Washington fans and Michigan State fans and Boston College fans and Iowa State fans and Utah fans and Oregon fans and Penn State fans and Notre Dame fans. We want to, and also everybody, no matter where you're from, if you think the South should cram it. The audience changes a little bit. So then what comes out of our mouth changes, but it doesn't change. I would never say on one show, hey, this team's the greatest. And then go on another show and say, this team stinks. Right? But maybe it's like, well, why this audience doesn't want to hear me talk about that. So why would I? So the audience changes. So but I don't think you should change your opinions. That's just lying.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm not against changing your opinions, but you have to be you can't change your opinion show to show. If you evolve, great. I hate flip-flopping people flip-floppers. It's like, I don't know. You mean you take in information?
Yeah.
And as you grow and evolve, you change your opinion based on the information and the context? Oh, that's terrible? Just don't say one thing on Tuesday and one thing on Wednesday to make people happy.
Yeah.
As Washington made a playoff run, I thought I heard people saying Rome Odunze might be the best receiver in college football. Did you hear that? What do you think that was? Because for the previous 2 years, all anybody was saying was Marvin Harrison Jr. not only is the best receiver in college football, he might be the best player in college football. How do you think that Odunze discussion twisted that?
I mean, he was just playing and Marvin wasn't. It had been, what was the day of the Michigan game? The 25th of November, 24th of November. And it had been that long since Marvin played a game. We knew he wasn't going to play in the Cotton Bowl. He just wasn't front of mind anymore. I think if Marvin was playing on the playoff stage, that conversation wouldn't have been happening. It creeped up a little bit during the Bolitnikov stuff and not so much about Odunze. I think there were a lot of people who thought Malik Neighbors should have won that just because his production was better. But even then, I think there seemed to be a consensus that Marvin was the best receiver in the country. And then people, I think, just became prisoner of the moment and started talking more about Roma Dunze, which I don't 100% fault them for, because it's not like Roma Dunze is some scrub that people are trying to pump up. Like, he's very good. I think it's a conversation worth having. My answer to the question is still that Marvin Harrison Jr. is the best receiver in the country, but I don't think it's like a year ago, it was like Jalen Hyatt won the Biletnikoff, and everyone's kind of, well, not everyone, but a lot of people thought it was a little weird because like Jalen Hyatt kind of only did one thing, and like Marvin was a more complete, I think, receiver. It wasn't like Roma Dunze was just like a go ball merchant and that's all he ever did. Like, he's a really well polished receiver who's going to go very high in the NFL draft. So it was odd, maybe like how loud the conversation was, and I don't agree with it, but I'm not surprised that it happened because Odunze was playing and Marvin wasn't.
Felt like people were kissing the audience's butt a little bit, because it's like, if you're going to say, I just don't think, like, to say Roma Odunze the best receiver in college football, it's like, I think you have to, like, well, remember that Marv exists and maybe explain why you think that he is better than Marvin Harrison Jr. Information has come into the building that's going to affect your opinion. Don't just act like the guy doesn't exist. So I think like Odunze is more physical probably than Marv, but I think like route running, hands, precision, being in the right spot, I'd probably take Marv. And I'm not saying Odunze is not good at that, but again, they're the two best, I think, definitively. I noted that.
I also I think it helps too, and like I try not to go down this road too often, but if you're a national college football person, it's not the worst thing in the world to find a way to rope Ohio State fans into your conversation. And the best way to do that is by negging Ohio State players.
Yeah. It is like the art of like attracting potential life partners is very similar to attracting college football audiences.
Yes.
You neg them.
Yeah, that's right.
I love Roma Odunze, but I wouldn't say on Kings of the North, Roma Odunze is the best receiver in college football. And then on Kings of Columbus, say Marvin Harrison Jr. is the best receiver in college football. You know,
right.
You gotta have to make sure you're consistent. All right. Oh, now to the thing where you have the incredibly difficult choice to make. Good luck.
Denzel Burke.
Okay. So Marvin Harrison Jr., and we want to note this. This is the most interesting part of the draft, is like where guys have gone over the course of the draft. Marvin Harrison Jr. initially was number 1 in the very first draft. In the second draft, he actually fell to number 2 because you took Denzel Burke number 1. And then Marv went back to number 1. Now he finishes number 1. You take Denzel Burke here at number 2. Burke was 6th last time we did this. He was 7th in the preseason, then 1st, 6th last time. 2 here, I think, is certainly one of the guys in the mix for this. He was not number 2 on my list, and number 3 will be the guy that I had number 2, who's Jack Sawyer.
Yep.
And I think this has been a particularly interesting sort of rise for Jack Sawyer. He was 5th last time, preseason 16. After week 4, he was number 18. Then he was number 5. Now he's number 3. 6.5 sacks, led the team, was second team All Big Ten, played great at the end of the year. Like, are you generally okay with him going 3 here?
Yeah, I would have taken him 3 if I had this pick. So I'm with you. The second half of his season was incredible. Obviously, the Cotton Bowl was a great performance, but I think there's a strong argument that he was Ohio State's best defensive player for like the last 5 games of the season.
I would have taken him ahead of Denzel, but I don't disagree with the idea of Denzel then Jack, but I think they're the guys who should go 2 and 3 here. Yeah. So who are you taking 4?
I'm going to take Tyleik Williams 4th.
Yep, that's who I had 4th too. And this is a guy that's been very high on our lists, kind of from the jump. Not from the jump, actually. He was 22nd, barely made the list. You took him as the last pick in the preseason draft, because sometimes Bill Landis likes to remind you that he's a genius. Then he was 3rd, and now in the final evaluation here, he's 4th. But again, for him to be a top 5 player for this team, I think is a great accomplishment for him. Mm-hmm. So we go offense, 3 defensive guys. I'm going to go back to offense now, and I'm going to take TreVeyon Henderson.
Yep.
And
that's what I would have done.
That's what you would have done. TreVeyon started off 9th in the preseason, then fell to 13th, was 4th last time out, and I think is definitively, like, I think pound the table definitively the second best offensive player on this team when you talk about upside, when you talk about production, when you talk about availability. Didn't quite get to 1,000 yards, 926 rushing yards, 11 touchdowns. Became the 28th Buckeye with at least 2,000 rushing yards in his career. And like, again, we just saw, right, his presence when he's healthy, when he's himself, he changes things.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, he's the one that kind of got the rushing attack into shape in the second half of the season. Like the offensive line did play a little better, but it was mostly Trayvon's ability to find some space and hit a couple of home runs that I think made everyone feel a lot better about the direction that was going. And he didn't have the game against Michigan that I thought he would. Not to say that he played poorly necessarily, but I was expecting a little more of an impact there. Maybe the same thing in the Cotton Bowl again. Like I don't think he played poorly. Maybe he could have gotten the ball more. But yeah, he looked like, his normal explosive self once he came back from that injury that he got in the Notre Dame game. And I'm with you. Like it's there's no argument for me who the second best offensive player was this year. It was Trey.
And I think we have to keep in mind, like he did this in a world where the offensive line play was not up to the Ohio State standard. Yeah. So give this guy Michigan's offensive line. My gosh, he might be in New York. Right. I mean, like that's I think the kind of thing we're talking about here. So just again, as things evolve, our top 6 after week 11, we have drafted 5 of those 6 guys in the top 5 here. So not a ton has changed, but the guy who was once upon a time number 2 for us the last time we did this has not been drafted yet. I'm curious to see where he goes. Will he go here? He had taken 6.
I'm taking JT Tuimoloau.
You are taking him. He was second. Yeah. He was second last time out for us. JT's evolution, 5th in the preseason, 5th after week 4, 2nd after week 11, and 6th now. I had him 7th overall.
Okay.
And we can get into this discussion a little more in depth when we talk about the defensive line, because I had Mike Hall 6th. So I will take Mike Hall 7th. So this is now the top 7 players for Ohio State in our draft. We took their 4 starting defensive linemen, 3rd, 4th, 6th, and 7th. You think this is a little high for Mike Hall?
No, like I think it was a weird season for Mike Hall. Like I didn't think that he played poorly. I just had such high expectations that he didn't really meet. So like I'm a little soured, I guess, on the season that Mike Hall had, but I think it's okay. He was an impactful. There were every game I think he was making impact plays. So I think it's an okay pick.
This is perhaps a little bit inconsistent because unlike Jack Sawyer, I don't know that Mike Hall went nuts at the end of the year. Mike Hall started off 6th, talking about expectations, was the number 6 player for us in the preseason, then went down to 20, then was 18th when we did this near the end of the year. And I just took him 7th, and I might be the prisoner of a stat I just looked up that we're going to talk about later. So I'm not apologizing, but also I think we're in a big mishmash here. So I think which is again, we'll talk about it. Is that good or is that bad at a place like Ohio State that you're not sure what the difference is between the 6th or 7th best player on the team and the 14th or 15th best player on the team, which is I think where we are with this team. So he taken 8th.
Jordan Hancock.
Yep. I'm right in that range for him as well. We just really like this guy's contribution to this team as a slot corner, right?
Yeah, and there were a couple of games where he had to step outside and play cornerback because they had some injuries, and he showed tremendous versatility. But he had an okay game in the Cotton Bowl and some tough matchups there too. So, I don't know that we see a lot of guys who have his blend of skills to be able to cover like a corner and play the run like a safety. I thought he had a really productive year and was way more involved than I anticipated him being coming into the season. I think he ended up 6th on the defense in total snaps played.
Kind of a steady rise, I think continued to show over the course of the year how much he matters. 12th on our preseason draft, then 14th, 7th last time out, but he didn't fall really or anything. He winds up 8th here, but it's just he's right in this range. Clearly one of Ohio State's 10 best and most important players. I would challenge anybody to dispute that fact, right?
Yeah. Yep.
All right. So we have done 8 picks, 6 defense. Surprised? 6 of the top 8 are defense for who Ohio State typically is?
I mean, if you would have told me at the beginning of the year that we ended up here, I'd be surprised, but Having watched the season play out, no, I'm not surprised.
Good, bad, or just the way it is?
Probably not great for what Ohio State wants to be.
I mean, there's like you tell after the 2021 season, before
Actually, I'm changing my answer. It's fine. You can be a defense first team.
Yeah. Before you hired Jim Knowles, if you would have said like, hey, 2 years from now, 6 of your top 8 players are going to be defensive guys, I think people would be like, what?
Yeah.
So, and you're still good. Like, it's not like 6 of your top 8 guys are defensive guys. You went 7-5. By the way, Ohio State finished number 10 in the final AP poll. I sent this out to our tech subscribers. Hey, tech subscribers, 614-662-4509. I think it probably got past a lot of people. 2-week free trial. Because it kind of doesn't matter, but also it kind of does matter. Like for history, it's like, hey, how many times? Because the college football playoff final poll, like, is not the end of the season poll, right? So I do like it, and then bowl games don't matter as much. And then I do think we're going to hit a threshold where making the playoff is going to be a very defining thing. I think people must hang playoff banners, like schools hang Final Four banners. You have to hang playoff banners. But to finish, they finished 10th. And if they would have beaten Missouri in the Cotton Bowl, they would have finished 6th or 7th. They were 7th in the AP poll and, in the rankings before bowl season. But anyway, I think it's 19 of the last 22 years, Ohio State has finished in the top 10 in the year-end AP poll. 19 of 22 years. Pretty crazy.
Not bad. Yeah.
9th, I'll take Cade Stover.
Okay.
I think we underrated him at times during the course of the season. The gap between what he was as a tight end and what everybody else was, I think, was pretty stark. He started off 13th in the preseason, which is probably too low, then 7th, then 8th, and he goes 9th here. Who you taking to round out the top 10?
It is tough, right? Because it is a hodgepodge. I am going to take Josh Proctor.
Okay. So Josh Proctor is a top 10 player. Third best PFF grade among defenders for this team, behind only Jack Sawyer and Denzel Burke. Off the board. Was not ranked in the preseason. And then 11th, and then 11th, and now a top 10. Top 10! There are so many points you could go back to Josh Proctor's career and then say, hey, 2023 would be one of their 10 best players, and you would not have believed it.
I would have. I wrote him off before this year. I thought when he came back, I thought it was weird. When he was running with the ones in the spring, I thought it was wrong. When he came out of camp as a starting free safety, I thought it was wrong. And then he shut me up in tremendous fashion this year.
We thought they were tricking us.
Yeah.
It was like, almost like Josh Proctor's a placeholder.
Yep.
People thought Malik Hartford was going to play over Josh Proctor. Josh Proctor. Because the other thing that wouldn't have made any sense, I think every point in his career, you could have said, Josh Proctor will be one of the 10 best players for the 2023 Ohio State Buckeyes. It's either, the beginning of a career is like, there's no way he's going to be here in 2023. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
6th year in the program. Like how, because that's not how it works here. He's a top 100 national recruit who stays for 6 years and then is great in year 6. Usually if you're here in year 6, it's because you don't have anything else to do or you're not here. So this was a very tough needle for him to thread, and he threaded it and really helped Ohio State. I'll take Emeka Egbuka 11th, and this is because they don't win the Notre Dame game without him.
Yep.
And if they lose the Notre Dame game, their season goes in a completely different direction. I think we talk about them, we think about them. For all the fans, it's a completely different season, I think, if they lose to Notre Dame. So we know he battled injury, 2nd in the preseason, 4th after the Notre Dame game. 10th, battling injuries last time we did this, finishes just outside the top 10 at number 11. I think this is about right. Yes.
Yeah. I think it's right. It's, definitely not the season that he wanted to have, but I think almost all of that is just injury related. It's a really nasty kind of ankle thing he had going on there that obviously impacts what a receiver wants to do. So he was another guy who I thought like might have a bigger Cotton Bowl and didn't, and in the absence of Marvin Harrison Jr., but try not to hold that against him too much. And you're right. They don't win the Notre Dame game without him. So I'm good with this spot.
All right. 12 to you.
I will take,
I did a top 10 to prep for our 22 player draft. I only prepped the top 10 and they're all gone. So that sound you just made, I'm going to make that sound later too.
Yeah. I'm going to go with, Davis and Igbinosun.
Yeah. I think that's the right call. I think that's where I would have gone. Good player, really mattered. Wouldn't want to think about this season without him.
Right.
For Ohio State. And I think, again, for their top 3 corners to be all in the top 12, I think is probably appropriate. There's a guy that we all want to pick, and I think we're all going to be a little more circumspect on the guy that we're waiting on than we have been in the past on drafts with him. I will say Davison Igbinosun off the radar, was not in our top 22 to begin the season, then 12th, then 14th, and winds up 12th. And I think that was the right pick. I did the PFF grades for everybody, which are just a guide. They are certainly not the end all be all. This is a tough spot. Can you take a backup? Can you take a backup as the 13th best player on the team? Does that even make sense? No, I don't think I can.
No, probably not.
All right.
I don't know. It depends on who it is, I guess.
I'll take Sonny Styles.
Okay.
This is the guy we just were fighting over drafting him the entire year. Good year. Good year. Did he change the face of Ohio State football in his first year as a starter? No. 11th in the preseason, 10th in the next draft, 9th. And so it is a little interesting that his lowest ranking of the season comes in the final draft when all the hay is in the barn. 53 tackles, 2 sacks, a forced fumble, started every game. I think it's some indication of like we were on the lookout for extraordinary greatness as a second-year player and first-year starter, and what we got was a very good season that maybe wasn't extraordinary, which is fine.
Yeah, and the end of his season was not great. He was put, I think, into somewhat of a tough position when Lathan Ransom got hurt, and Sonny had to play that bandit spot and like wasn't always in the box. And I think we all agree that that's where he's at his best. So, and even when he was in the box, like he made a bad play against Michigan on the late Blake Corum touchdown. He just missed a tackle in the hole. So it fizzled out a little bit for him, but I still think a solid season. Probably mostly in line with what I thought it would be. I certainly thought there was a chance for more of a star breakout, but I think good overall, even if the ending wasn't what people wanted it to be. And another important player to the defense who we have it here started every game.
All right, who you taking 14?
I will take the guy who I think was their best offensive lineman this year, who was Matthew Jones.
Okay. That's probably right.
Maybe a touch high.
But we're also like, it's hard. I mean, there's only 22 guys who start, and this is the first offensive lineman taken. That's 5 of the spots. Like, you got to take an offensive lineman probably at some point. Matthew Jones, 19th in the preseason in our draft, then 17th, then 13th, and he winds up here 14th. I certainly do not dispute that he was the best offensive lineman this year. I don't think that anybody could dispute that. We're running out of guys here a little bit. I will take Lathan Ransom, and this is a little bit of a tough evaluation because he was hurt for the last 4 games of the regular season. I think it was played 8 games, right? But they did miss him, right? As much as they sort of like, yes, they were able to fill in. All of a sudden, Jordan Hancock stays on the field every snap at slot corner. Sonny Styles slides back, but you maybe don't get the best of everybody in those situations where when you have Lathan Ransom, he's very comfortable at bandit. You get the best out of everybody. They did miss him, right? They did.
Yeah, they definitely missed him. Think of the touchdown in the Michigan game when Malik Hartford's on the field as an extra defensive back. Like, I don't know that he's in that position if Lathan Ransom's available. Again, some of the plays that Sonny Styles, I think, found himself in trouble. Maybe that's Lathan Ransom trying to make those plays, and maybe he makes them. So they for sure missed him in the second half of the season.
So we take him 15th here. I mean, he really is very possibly a top 10 player if he stays healthy the entire season.
Yeah.
So Lathan Ransom, 8th in the preseason, then 9th, then 16th after he was hurt, as we were kind of assessing, okay, well, he still mattered, but now he's out. So he finishes 15th here. Who are you taking 16th?
Man, I am going to take I don't know. It's hard, man. I guess I'll take Tommy Eichenberg. So
I was going to ask you this question. Who's their best linebacker? Who was their best linebacker this year?
Cody Simon, I think, was.
Yeah, that's why I was going to ask. Like, when I said, can I take a backup? like ahead of the starters. I mean, Cody Simon's like not a starting linebacker for them, but is he their best linebacker?
He played half the snaps with Tommy, but I think when Cody played for Tommy, he played better than Tommy.
So then why didn't you take Cody Simon?
All right, I'll take Cody Simon. I kind of wanted to, but I didn't know like the playing half the snaps thing. But like I thought, once he had to step into that starting role because Tommy was hurt, I thought he performed really well. And like, listen, I give Tommy all the credit in the world for trying to play against Michigan. I don't think he played very well, and I don't know if that was the best decision for Ohio State's defense in that game. And then obviously he didn't play in the bowl game. And I thought Cody stepped up in a significant way. He has limitations as a player. Like I hate when it's a passing down and I see Cody Simon out there, but against the run, I thought he was really good this year.
So, I mean, it's just very difficult because guys are affected by their circumstance, and we are just, but like, I mean, like we're right. We just picked the backup to the Big Ten linebacker of the year ahead of the Big Ten linebacker of the year. So people like this guy was voted the best linebacker in the Big Ten. He's not in our top 16 Ohio State players. That is merely a factor of the people voting in the Big Ten not really knowing what happened this year and going by how extraordinary Tommy Eichenberg was last year
100%.
when he was a second-team All-American, right? They're wrong. We're not wrong.
Yeah, Big Ten voters do that a lot, or reward voters, I think, do that a lot. It's like Shaun Wade was an All-American in the year where he played terribly because he was really good the year before.
Right.
It happens all the time. And it's like, I don't think Tommy played terribly this year, but I don't think he played like the Big Ten linebacker of the year. I think it was a conversation to be had last year. And I can't remember if I might have voted for him, but it was just like a correction, I think, to maybe some people thinking they handled him wrong in 2022 and gave him the award this year, which is fine because I think he deserves to leave Ohio State with that award on his resume. Yeah. But I don't know that his play this year backed that up. And I think Cody played a little better.
That he won it over like Jay Higgins from Iowa or Abdul Carter from Penn State or a bunch of other guys. The Michigan linebackers is crazy. I'll take Tommy Eichenberg. Okay. But so I was looking up on PFF. Cody Simon played 374 defensive snaps this year. Tommy Eichenberg played 607 defensive snaps this year. So Tommy did play a lot more, but when Cody was in there, it was as good or sometimes better. So Simon 16th, Eichenberg 17th, up to you now.
It is up to me now. We're kind of running out of defensive starters. I guess we're just about out of defensive starters.
One more.
One more?
Two more. There's two more starters.
Oh, yeah, there's two more starters.
Well, borderline starter and a starter.
I'm going to take Ty Hamilton.
Yeah, that's I think who you should take. And I think it's who I would have taken next too. Then again, is he a starter at defensive tackle? I mean, he's right in the mix. Tyleik Williams played 645 snaps this year. Mike Hall played 413 and Ty Hamilton played 350. So Tyleik Williams was on the field a ton, but Ty Hamilton's like a co-starter with Mike.
Yeah. And I shared this stat with people on one of the dailies earlier this week when we were talking about Ty Hamilton coming back. And the PFF stat stops, which is like tackles that create a bad or failure of a play. Ty Hamilton had 20 of those, which is like a pretty high number for a defensive tackle. So he played well, even if he had a smaller snap count.
Running through a little bit of the last couple guys, their evolution during the course of the draft. Cody Simon, not drafted in the preseason, not drafted after week 4, was 17th in our last draft, goes 16th here. Tommy Eichenberg, this is just the difference of Eichenberg and Simon. Tommy Eichenberg, 4th in the preseason, 6th after week 4, then 15th in our last draft, goes 17th here. So again, like Cody Simon is not drafted. Tommy Eichenberg is a top 4, top 6 player. And by the end of the year, we take Simon ahead of Eichenberg. Just very surprising how that worked out. Ty Hamilton, undrafted, 19th, and now goes 18th here. I do think that was the right pick by you. And I guess I'll do it. I'll take the starting quarterback, the Ohio State Buckeyes, at 19th, and I'll take Kyle McCord. And we were circumspect kind of from the start on this. Kyle McCord was 17th in our preseason draft, and he winds up 19th here. And maybe that was a sign of things to come when we took the starting quarterback 17th. But then after the Notre Dame game, he rises up to 8th. Then he's 12th. And now he goes 19th here. I mean, he started at Ohio State. And like, again, PFF grades are just a guide. Had the third highest PFF grade on the offense behind Marv and Trey.
Yeah, I think it's hard to have a bad PFF grade if you're a quarterback.
It is. Not a lot of 50s for the quarterback.
Yeah, there's just not a lot of those out there. Yeah, like he was an average starting quarterback for Ohio State this year, but with the way that a lot of the offense played, average like actually makes you stick out a little bit, I think. So,
yeah.
I'm fine with him here. I think he deserved to be in the top 22. That the Ohio State starting quarterback is 19th and not in the top 5, I think also is something that tells you a little something about how the season went. So
20th to you.
Donovan Jackson.
Yeah, I think that's right. And again, we will have a much more in-depth offensive line discussion. He's the second offensive lineman off the board here. I very vividly remember doing this where I took Donovan Jackson, I think, third in the preseason draft. And then the next two drafts, he was 22nd, barely made it, 21st, barely made it, now 20th. So he started off third, but now he's actually 22, 21, 20. Gradual progress for Donovan Jackson here at the end of the draft. And we really are kind of running out of guys to pick here. I guess I will take because there's some guys that popped in that kind of had moments but didn't sustain it. I'll take Steel Chambers.
Okay.
Who was the last defensive starter to take. He's a heck of a guy, has been a good solid Buckeye, a 3-year starter. I think it's a reminder of, and we'll have this discussion. You just compare Ohio State to itself. And when you think about like an off-ball linebacker at Ohio State, this is not what Ohio State is, right? This is a step below. And it's not Steel Chambers' fault. But like this is the land of Ryan Shazier and AJ Hawk, man. Like, what are we talking about? Right. So like that's what Ohio State needs to get back to. Wrap up the draft with number 22.
Number 22, I will take
your guy.
Who's my guy? Fryer?
Yeah. Have you abandoned your guy?
I mean, the second half of the year was really bad. I honestly don't know who to pick. I guess you could pick Fryer. I think you could pick Josh Simmons. I kind of want to pick Chip. I'm going to pick Chip.
Okay.
Pick Chip.
Chip Trainum off to Kentucky. Chip Trainum undrafted, then 19th, then undrafted. Gets our last spot here at 22. Steel Chambers started the year 10th. He was 10th in the preseason, then 16th and 20th. Wraps up at 21 here. Couple guys who were.
Should we maybe make it Xavier Johnson?
I mean, I think do we want Chip and X to share spot 22? I'd be fine with that.
I think it makes more sense for Xavier to be there. So if you want to have a dual 22, that's cool. That's cool with me.
Okay. So I mean, both kind of like do it all guys who certainly did help the team in multiple ways. So I'm good with that. Some guys who did not wind up getting drafted here at the end that were part of the discussion at other times. I took Carnell Tate 22nd in the most recent draft and kind of waiting for that to happen, and it never did. Thought he might make an impact in the Michigan game, and then sort of after the fact, Brian Hartline, right, and Ryan Dare kind of like, he's kind of hurt a little bit, and that kind of affected him, but never had that year-end breakout that we thought. Josh Fryer, who did not get picked here, 14th in the preseason, 15th after week 4, not drafted in the most recent draft, and not drafted again here today. Josh Simmons was never really on our radar. Did the starting left tackle for Ohio State get through the entire season without ever being part of our top 22 draft in 4 drafts? Yes, he did.
He would have been my next offensive line pick, though. I think without a doubt. Yeah.
That's what we're going to talk about. So like there's the standard of like compared to your own group now and compared to like the larger world on the history of Ohio State. Julian Fleming, 15th in the preseason, then 21st. Not drafted last time, not drafted here. So we'll wrap up. This is the final list of Ohio State's 22 best / most valuable, most productive, biggest contributions, most important players for this year. Number 1, Marvin Harrison Jr., then Denzel Burke, Jack Sawyer, Tyleek Williams, Travion Henderson rounds out the top 5. JT Tuimoloau, Mike Hall, Jordan Hancock, Cade Stover, Josh Proctor wraps up the top 10. 11 is Emeka Ibuka. 12 is Davison Igbinosun. 13 is Sonny Styles. Matthew Jones, 14, and Lathan Ransom, 15. It gets a little tough here. Had a little debate. Linebacker time. Cody Simon, 16, Tommy Eichenberg, 17, then Ty Hamilton, 18, starting quarterback Kyle McCord is 19, Donovan Jackson does get the top 20, and we wrap it up with Steel Chambers at 21, and Chip Trainum and Xavier Johnson sharing things at 22. Those are the best Ohio State Buckeyes for 2023. Write it in your scrapbook like, hey, it's an official thing. Who else is doing it? Is there a more official list of Ohio State's best 22 players? It's either PFF grades, which are a guide but not definitive, or it's what Doug and Bill say. What would you rather have, Bill? PFF or Philly Billy and French Vanilli?
Philly Billy and French Vanilli, no doubt. Yeah.
You guys, hey, you go buy a PFF or buy PBFF? What's vanilla start with? Oh, it is Vanilli, so it's just a V. PBFV. The PBFV stats? Hey, did you see the PBFV rankings? Do you think we can get that going?
Sounds like a communicable disease.
Yeah. Oh, geez, your PVFB show. I can't even say it. When we come back, we're going to talk about did Ohio State have enough talent this year next on Kings of Columbus. All right, back now for a broader discussion about whether Ohio State had enough talent in 2023. And we're not doing recruiting rankings, Bill. So it's like production. Did they play well enough, right? Did they have enough productive players who did their jobs in enough spots? And I want to start on the offensive line. Give me your ranking again of what your list would be of Ohio State's 5 starting offensive linemen this year.
I would go Matthew Jones, Donovan Jackson, Josh Simmons, Josh Fryer, Carson Hinsman.
Okay. So preseason, we did a huge 2-hour tackle podcast. We maybe should have done a center podcast as well. I feel like our fears/concerns about the tackles, if I was at like a 9.5 we did that rating, like what's your alert level?
Yeah.
I think maybe my alert, it wasn't quite as bad as I thought it might be, but it was still not up to the Ohio State level and like not. Let me splice a hair here. The difference between not good and not good enough. I would say the tackle play was not good enough. Was it also not good?
I would say that, yeah, it was probably not good. I don't think it was like, are there degrees? Like, is there something between good and bad that I can pick? Cause I think that's where I would land. I don't think it was outright bad.
Inconsistent,
maybe. Yeah.
Right. Even like early on, maybe Fryer was better than Simmons. And then as Simmons got his feet under him, Fryer kind of tailed off. And again, most of this discussion is about the Ohio State coaching staff, past and present, putting Josh Fryer and Josh Simmons in this situation where, Josh Fryer's a recruit in the 500s, and all of a sudden it's like you're the starting right tackle, and Josh Simmons is a starting right tackle in the Mountain West and becomes a starting left tackle in the Big Ten. It's not planned. And especially, I think in the case of Simmons, it's not fair. So, but here's where I really have my dispute. Like Berm was giving me a little good-natured grief on the old Slack channel because like I refuse to admit that Josh Simmons is good. And it depends on what standard you're using. Because will Berm not at times argue that Josh Simmons was their best offensive lineman this year?
I believe he thinks that Josh Simmons was their best offensive lineman. Yeah.
So I think that might be true. I'm not saying he's wrong to think that. But the standard on the offensive line this year for Ohio State was so lowered compared to what the standard at offensive line should be for Ohio State that I don't think anybody on the starting offensive line was within range of what Ohio State had become accustomed to on the offensive line. And that's my argument. My argument is not really, was Josh Simmons better than Donovan Jackson, Matthew Jones, Carson Hinsman, and Josh Fryer? My argument is compare Josh Simmons to the guys who last played left tackle at Ohio State. So I went back to the beginning of the Ryan Day era when they want to start throwing the ball. Ryan Day arrives here in 2017. And I went through all the PFF grades, all the pressures given up in pass protection, and all the run blocking grades for all the starting offensive linemen going back to 2017. So it's 7 years of this. And this is the discussion I want to have, because it's the Ohio State standard. These are the previous 6 starting left tackles at Ohio State with Ryan Day here. Paris Johnson in 2022, Nicholas Petit-Frere in 2021, Thayer Munford in 2020, 2019, 2018, and Jamarco Jones in 2017. By PFF grade, which is only a guide, it is not the end-all be-all, we will use it. I will use it as a guide here, but I prefer the PB offensive line rankings, so we will have Philly Billy check in and tell us what's really up. By PFF grade, Josh Simmons' PFF grade this year was 67.5. The last 7 years of Ohio State left tackle, that's tied for the worst with Thayer Munford's first year as a starter in 2018. And I think Thayer Munford first year as a starter did have a couple hiccups. Yeah. And then his last 3 years, left tackle, left guard, he's an excellent college football offensive lineman. Do you generally agree with that idea about Thayer Munford?
Yes, absolutely.
So then to me, Josh Simmons is not close to Paris Johnson last year. And again, that's not the standard either. Hey, be a top 10 pick level of guy. Be a first-team All-American. We understand that's not the level. But he's not that. He's not Nicholas Petit-Frere in 2021. He's not Thayer Munford in 2020 or 2019. And he's not Jamarco Jones in 2017. So it's not good enough. Now, again, not good enough, not good. It's not good enough. And that's on Justin Fry, Greg Studrawa, Ryan Day, and Mark Pantoni. It is not on Josh Simmons, but we cannot have the discussion center around, well, I don't know, he might have been the best offensive lineman this year. It's not good enough.
Yeah.
I thought he was far below what an Ohio State left tackle should be and has been. And I don't think that's in dispute.
No, I don't think that's in dispute either, but I guess when I assess the line, like, that's not the only issue. I think that's true of left tackle, right tackle, and center this year.
Going
right?
Through.
Yeah. So like, I think you're right there. Like, I think he, honestly, given what the expectations were, given where he came from, given his experience, given how much better he had to get, I think Josh Simmons probably played about as well as you could expect him to play in his first year as a starter here. And I think Ohio State expected some hiccups, and I guess they're looking for the 2-year payoff here, and we'll see what kind of leap he can make. But yeah, this year, I don't know that any spot on the offensive line played up to the standard this year. Maybe Matthew Jones at right guard, but even then there were some hiccups in there too. Like, I think my overall thought on the offensive line is that nobody played well enough that their job should be safe coming back next year. And that includes Josh Simmons, even if he played better than I certainly thought he would play and better than I think you thought he would play.
But I do think the only discussion right now that matters when you're evaluating a season that has finished and evaluating it in totality is the standard of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not about, so I would say, did he play about as expected? I think that's probably right. My big thing was, what could you possibly expect from a right tackle from the Mountain West who's now going to be the starting left tackle at Ohio State? Like, even the best case scenario. So I don't think it was like best case scenario. I think it was like expected case scenario. So I didn't think that this guy was going to land here and be like, oh my God, look at the athleticism. He was hiding in the Mountain West. He could have gone to UCLA. He's a COVID guy. Like, he's going to be like second team all Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
I did not think that was on the table. And that is not what happened. I thought absolute disaster. The offense literally cannot function was on the table. That didn't happen either. I'm not saying that happened. I'm saying that Ohio State set itself up for such a lower expectation generally that I think if we wanted to play a game called the biggest drop-off at any position in the Power Five, Paris Johnson to the former right tackle at San Diego State is in contention. And that's on Ohio State. How do you not have a plan? And it hurt them. The lack of plan hurt them. That this had to be what happened. Because Josh Fryer tried to play left tackle in spring football. Didn't work out. There's not another option. There's not another option. And this was not a good option, and it was the only option. But when we're talking about did they have enough talent, the talent they had at left tackle was vastly below the standard. And the only comparable thing in the Ryan Day era is when they got in a tough spot in 18. And guess what? 2018 offensive line, also not good. Because guess what they did in 2018? They did not run the ball, and they got the ball out of the quarterback's hands in half a second on every single throw.
Yep.
Because they knew the offensive line was bad. And it had gotten better since then. And this was a huge step back. So now let me give you some overall stuff now, because this is some of the stuff, right? Trying to do overall like PFF grades and just like the range of guys and that kind of thing. I do think like what they were laying down the last couple years on the offensive line was really pretty freaking good. And maybe we didn't. Did we appreciate it? Did we appreciate how good the offensive line was? I would say the offensive line in 2019, 2021, and 22 was perhaps outstanding.
Yes.
Maybe not in 20, but 19, 21, 22. Do we appreciate it in the moment, how good it was?
What was the weird year where they moved Thayer to guard?
That was in 21.
Yeah, I didn't love that. 19, 22 were very good, I think.
Okay. 20 was a little bit of a problem, but I think it was COVID effect a little bit. But anyway, okay. So this is the run blocking grades for the last 7 years by PFF. Run blocking grades in the 50s or 60s are not great, right?
Yeah.
So this year, 3 of the starting offensive linemen had a run blocking grade in the 50s or 60s. 2022, none of them did. 2021, none of them did. 2020, 3 of them did. 2019, none of them did. 2018, it was practically the whole offensive line. It was 4 of the 5. And 2017, it was 2. So that's a little bit of what I'm going on. I think pass protection, right, in 2021 maybe wasn't great. There were times, though, when NPF, Thayer, Munford, Luke Whippler, Paris Johnson, and DeJuan Jones just ran people over.
Yep.
And run blocking.
Yeah.
So, across the board, the level is just significantly lower. Let's run through overall. Last 7 years, okay, the PFF graded each position, just a guide. Josh Simmons was tied for the worst. Donovan Jackson was 4th among the 7 years of left guard. Carson Hinsman, the worst center grade, and it's not close. Matthew Jones was 4th among the right guards in the last 7 years, and Josh Fryer was 6th, second to last among the right tackles. Do you want to guess the only lower rated right tackle year in the last 7 years for Ohio State?
This goes back to 18?
Goes back to 17.
17? Would it have been Isaiah Prince in 18?
Isaiah Prince in 18, falling off a cliff and people freaking out.
Yeah.
That he was significantly better, as a younger player, and as last year he got worse.
Yeah.
Right. Remember when people freaked out about Isaiah Prince in 2018? People were freaking out.
Yeah.
That's the only right tackle Josh Fryer's better than in the last 7 years, right? He sure as heck is not DeJuan Jones. He's not NPF. He's not good Isaiah Prince. And I don't think he was as good as Brandon Bowen. Maybe if you want
Brandon Bowen was really good.
Right? So that's what we're talking about. So again, I'm just trying to set the parameters here. PFF grade across the board this year. Josh Simmons, 67.5. Donovan Jackson, 69.9. Carson Hinsman, 51.8. It's just awful. Matthew Jones, 70.6. Josh Fryer, 74.2. Guys, in terms of draft picks, I did this. So these 7, so this year doesn't count, they haven't been drafted. The previous 6 years in the Ryan Day era, there were 16 different offensive linemen who started in those 6 years, right? Nicholas Petit-Frere played multiple positions. Michael Jordan played multiple positions. Thayer Munford played multiple positions. It's 16 guys. How many of those 16 got drafted?
Oh, man. 11?
12.
Okay.
12 of 16. The only 4 that did not, Malcolm Pridgeon, who was the left guard in 18, and that line wasn't great.
JUCO transfer, yeah.
Demetrius Knox, who was a 2-year starter at right guard and was okay. He's actually, I think, been in the NFL, but he wasn't drafted. Malcolm Pridgeon was in the NFL too.
Yeah,
just not
they all
drafted.
made rosters, yeah.
And Brandon Bowen, who was a good 5th-year right tackle guy, and then Harry Miller, who cut short his football career. Otherwise, 2 first-rounders, Billy Price and Paris Johnson, a second-rounder, Josh Myers, 3 third-rounders, 2 fourth-rounders, a 5th-rounder, 2 sixth-rounders, and a 7th-rounder. You think in draft, with a ton of the dudes on the offensive line this year. Like Donovan Jackson, yes. Is Matthew Jones going to get drafted? I don't know. Like, would Josh Simmons and Josh Fryer get drafted based off their level of play this year? Like, again, Thayer Munford winds up being drafted in the 7th round, probably went too low. He's like starting in the NFL right now. He did not play at a draftable level his first year as a starter. So it doesn't mean they had NFL quality linemen all the way through every time. But also, this is the standard. The offensive line guys get drafted. So I'm super eager to contextualize for posterity that this offensive line was a gigantic step down from 2022. And also, generally speaking, definitively below any standard at Ohio State. So as we're watching here on YouTube, did Ohio State have enough talent in 2023? On the offensive line, it is a stark, definitive, affected the offense, hurt the team. No,
absolutely. Yeah. They couldn't run the ball. Didn't protect well enough. Center was a disaster. Not so much snapping issues, although there were some. Just across the board, I think it was not good enough. And you can point to a guy like Matthew Jones or Josh Simmons, whoever you want to say, and say like that guy was the best of the group this year, and that's fine. But I don't know how impressive it is if they're the best of the group when the group as a whole was far below the standard of what Ohio State is supposed to be. And I don't think any of us are surprised, right, based on how this has been trending, that the offensive line took a step back. I don't know. Did it end up being relative to your expectations coming in, like the whole group, not just Josh Simmons? Was it what you expected, above or below, or better or worse?
So it's very hard to answer because I thought it was possible that like the experience and talent at guard would like lift up the guys around them. Yeah. And it felt like instead the inexperience and lack of talent at center and tackle dragged down the guards.
Yes, I agree with that.
So like if you said, I think it's possible that I would say Josh Simmons and Josh Fryer both met my very low expectations, but the guards were under my expectations and the center was far under my expectations. Yeah. And so then in totality, I had huge concerns about the offensive line, and they still overall were still probably worse than I expected as a group.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard for me to really contextualize it that way. Because I think the Cotton Bowl was a disaster, but if you remove that from the equation, I think they got a little better as the year went on. Maybe at least at the 4 spots that aren't center, I think maybe they got a little better as the year went on. But I think they ended up being worse than I thought they would be too. That's where I land.
On our post-game show after the Michigan-Washington national title game, we were talking about the moments where Michigan gets out and their guys get to the second level and they're making perfect blocks and it is just there for the running back. How often did that happen with the Ohio State offensive line?
Rarely, if ever.
Like, that's the thing to like, I just like that part of it. They did not get like destroyed in pass protection, which is what I thought was possibly going to happen. Cause I don't know, maybe now I'm being too harsh on them. I just felt at times, like I thought like Chop Robinson at Penn State, like maybe he's going to be a 1st round pick. Right. And I thought he would be more impactful against Ohio State. Also, Ohio State got a little lucky. He got hurt in that game. Yes. Maybe he was going to do that in the second half and he didn't. I actually didn't feel like they faced edge rushers that challenged them that much. And I felt like maybe if they would have been challenged a little bit more, they would not have met the challenge, because I was sort of waiting for guys to drop long arms and spin moves. And I don't know, I'm just saying pass rush things now, but right. Bring out the toolbox and be like, oh man. Right. Yeah. Or teams to really run some games on them and have them blocking air, which, by the way, kind of happened on the defining play of the season when Kyle McCord threw the last interception. So that wasn't as bad as I thought. But the run game had no juice.
None. Like, part of it was the plan, too, I think, from like Justin Fry and Ryan Day to start the season. Like, they just didn't seem to have a great feel for what those guys could do, and it took them half the year to figure it out. But even when they figured it out, it wasn't like they were blocking it up perfectly every play and like getting to the second level like you're talking about. It became slightly more functional, but I still think far below what Ohio State needs it to be.
Not a strength.
Never a strength.
Never a strength. And is it not an expectation that the offensive line at Ohio State should be a strength?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I
So,
think
so
so.
like,
Yeah.
I guess, like, am I stating the obvious here, or is this a needed reminder? Because I felt like we fell into a vortex of comparing them to each other and being like, hey, you know what? It's not that. That is not the comparison.
I think there are like after the Cotton Bowl, I don't think anyone needed the reminder because that was a really bad game. But I also I saw some discussion like after the national title game and like how much Michigan's defensive line one got after Alabama in the Rose Bowl and then also got after Washington in the national title game, that like that didn't really happen against Ohio State. And like what does that mean? Which I think is a point worth making, which I think speaks to what you were saying or just a minute ago about the Penn State stuff. Like I thought that there were going to be games where Ohio State's offensive line just got like absolutely worked to the point where they weren't going to be able to do anything. And that never happened. But I also thought that there were moments where Ohio State needed its offensive line to like take over a game and they weren't capable of doing that.
Yeah.
So like they kind of landed like right in the middle. So they weren't an abject disaster, but they weren't nearly what they needed to be.
Okay. The other group I want to talk about on the offensive side of the ball is receiver. And these were the targets for Ohio State receivers this year. 114 for Marvin Harrison Jr., 60 for Emeka Ibuka, obviously played 10 total games, missed time, wasn't himself with the injury. 41 for Julian Fleming, 28 for Carnell Tate, 17 for Xavier Johnson. So this, I don't know if this sounds like sacrilege or like crazy person thing. When Emeka Ibuka got hurt, was the talent at receiver what it should be?
No, I don't. I think not. I think with the way that this program has recruited, there should have been someone ready to pick up that slack, and it didn't feel like there was really. Like blips here and there from like a Carnell Tate, and like Xavier Johnson stepped up and made some plays, but I don't think you want to be relying on a Xavier Johnson to do that. And you probably, and even like Carnell Tate's a true freshman, but maybe you want to see more from those guys given the recruiting pedigree. So I think that the play of the position outside of Marv, I think, left something to be desired for sure.
The guys who were the second year receivers this year, like that class just got like wiped out. Like, and I think we kind of knew that in the moment that maybe it was a cut below, but even the idea of like, okay, Marvin Harrison Jr. is excellent. Emeka Ibuka is excellent. They're both first-round talents. Julian Fleming in year 4 has kind of become what he is going to be, which is good blocker, solid guy, can make some plays, but never really got to a point where, okay, well, if Emeka's not here, we'll just throw it to Julian 8 times a game. And then that the options, right? The options to replace Emeka in the slot were what? Like a freshman or a 6th-year walk-on?
Xavier Johnson or Brandon Ennis. Yeah.
So I'm not saying Xavier Johnson's not a good player. He's an excellent football player. I'm not sure, given the reputation of this receiving room, that when you have one injury, that's what you should get down to. And I think the fact that the second-year receivers were Caleb Brown, who transferred already, Caleb Burton, who transferred already, Kojo Antwi, who's still around, and
Keon Grace, who was, I think, hurt for at least part of this season.
So that none of those guys were next up in a way that could be ready, I think ended up hurting them.
Yeah, I mean, I put Jaden Ballard in that mix too. Like they don't, I think it's clear they don't trust Jaden Ballard to put him in big spots because they didn't do it. Yeah, I think the development of the depth there hurt them a little bit.
Yeah,
I think that's right.
I mean, so I don't know. I mean, it's like what do we hear that podcast show? It said Ohio State's receiver room stinks. No, it's not. But that's the requirement sometimes that your second level guys, like, no one likes to say it more than coaches and programs, next man up. Like they weren't quite at that situation.
They were not there
at the slot receiver where, in years past, right? Like what happened when Jackson Smith and Jigba got hurt and was lost for the year?
Yeah. Emeka Ibuka had 70 catches for like 1,100 yards. Yeah.
So like that's the best example you could find of being ready. So, but again, that's kind of the standard. So again, okay, maybe you don't have to be that, but it was far below that. There was not a second year Emeka Egbuka ready to go. So I thought it was worth touching on. I want to dive in on mostly the defensive line, and we're going to do that next on Kings of Columbus. All right, Bill, I want to do defensive side of the ball. Like, was the talent good enough? Corner, yes, right? Are we back to the standard at corner, right?
Yep.
Safety, when they're healthy, certainly as we look forward, they took a shot to their depth with the number of guys that left. But when you think about Ransom, Proctor, Styles, pretty good.
Yeah, I think that configuration was good. I guess like similar to receiver, I would say like why wasn't like Kai Stokes ready to step up or something like that? Like maybe with the depth, younger depth could have been a little better, I suppose. But the starting trio was good. Yeah.
I do think it's one of those, right? Like that Malik Hartford was the guy who was like the sixth DB. And when there were issues, was the next guy as a true freshman instead of who? Kai Stokes and who else? Like, it's like, that's why all those guys left. It's like, well, Malik Hartford jumped them.
Yeah.
So the fact that those guys did not develop into being the next guys up did hurt them at least a little bit.
It did. And also they didn't get a ton out of Jahad Carter, who I knew was hurt part of the year.
Yeah.
And I get like, I mean, he was a guy who was like a pretty important defender at Syracuse and just didn't have really any kind of impact on Ohio State this year.
Linebacker, I think they need a talent jump there. I don't think that's unreasonable to ask. And it doesn't, I do think it's a little bit of an odd, and you don't want to look a gift horse, right? But like Tommy Eichenberg and Steel Chambers basically earned starting roles for like the last 3 years, right?
Yeah. And
I think just in terms of like where they're going to be drafted, Tommy played so well in the role he played last year. I don't want to downgrade that, but I think it's part of why maybe people, me, others get obsessed with CJ Hicks is because you're looking for Ryan Shazier, AJ Hawk, and it's like, okay, well, Tommy and Steele, and I think even Cody's like a top 100 recruit, but like as good as they are, they're not that. And man, aren't you accustomed to some version of that? I don't even just in terms of playmaking, like Pete Werner, right? Like Malik Harrison, it doesn't have to be Ryan Shazier, but I think they need a shot there. And whether it's CJ Hicks or not, I don't know who else it would be. I think they need they need a shot in the arm there in terms of like just maniacal ball heat-seeking missile level of linebacker play.
Yeah, it's like bigger, faster, stronger dudes. I think at that position. That it wasn't the Achilles heel of the defense, but I think the times when the defense got in the most trouble is when their smaller linebackers just weren't equipped to handle what was coming at them in the run game. And weren't equipped to take on blocks and shed blocks and then make plays. And I think Tommy and Steele probably got better at that throughout their careers, but they're just on the leaner side for linebackers. So I don't know if they were ever going to get to the place where you sort of expect an Ohio State linebacker to be. Whereas like CJ Hicks is more of that mold, like Malik Harrison is more of that mold. Even Gabe Powers, like, because I think is more built that way. Maybe the question I think with like Hicks and Powers is like, are they more built to be just down on the line of scrimmage? Maybe I don't know. Ohio State needs to figure that out, but I do think there needs to be just sort of generally more of a like playmaking athleticism kind of trait at the linebacker position that Ohio State has right now.
Do you think that there needs to be like a greater level of playmaking sort of across the board on this defense? And a couple statistical things. They forced 11 turnovers, which was tied for 124th in the nation, which is not a lot. They averaged 5.5 tackles for loss per game, which was tied for 73rd in the nation. I had been doing some stuff with their havoc rating. I think maybe we talked about it before. That was lower than any of like the past 8 years with this defense. And I don't know if this is right in my head. Like your scheme is sort of to make sure that you don't give up stuff. But sometimes when you do stuff, maybe that's a little bit more on the individual greatness of players. And so this was a very, very good defense. We've already had this conversation. Now, like, the defense is now good enough to nitpick a little bit. So they stopped giving up big plays, but they didn't make many big plays. And when the defense wasn't good enough was not good enough in scheme, coaching, or personnel, right? As Jim Knowles and Ryan Day always say.
Yeah.
Like, I think they're good enough. I don't know. I think they're good enough in scheme. I think they're good enough in coaching. And I do think they're good enough in personnel, but yet I still want a little more havoc and playmaking from that personnel. And so now I guess I'm asking the question, like, why it wasn't there. And are these reasonable statistics to cite when they don't force a lot of turnovers and they don't get a lot of tackles for loss?
Well, it's weird. Like, I kind of want to go back and look, like, the last handful of years, like, where their havoc rate ranks for defenses that finished in the top 10, and whether you want a top 10 in efficiency or top 10 in total defense, whatever, they're there for both of them. But, like, I think I'm assuming that it's hard to be kind of like as sound and as good as they were about not giving up big plays and then also generating a lot of havoc, unless you have, like, a Chase Young on your roster.
Yeah.
And they don't have that. But I could be wrong on that, because I feel like Michigan's defense accomplished that without having, like, a Chase Young on its roster, right? So maybe there is something to the scheme. Not that the scheme so much is bad, but maybe it could be, maybe there's something more they can get into that helps them generate more havoc, or whether that's, like, more games up front, or like mixing up coverages more on the back end, more disguise, that kind of stuff. Not necessarily blitzing like crazy all the time, but more disguise, more confusion, maybe, which is, I think, the balance that Jim Knowles tried to strike this year. And it worked really well. Like, the defense clearly played well, and well enough, I think, for Ohio State to win a championship if the offense was capable of doing its part. But I'm with you that I'm still left wanting a little more production in terms of, like, TFL, sacks, interceptions, forced fumbles, turnovers on downs, like just general havoc play.
And I do think that's the reasonable next step. And I do think this was a necessary step in year 2. Year 1, Jim Knowles, a little too aggressive. Year 2, dial that back. Make sure you don't give up big plays. Incredibly effective. Year 3, don't give up big plays while also finding a way to make more big plays. But you had to establish the foundation of don't give up big plays first.
Yeah.
And now you try to find a way to unleash some dudes while you're doing that. So let's talk about the defensive line. Jack Sawyer, according to PFF, Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau tied with 37 pressures. Among Power 5 edge rushers, where do you think that ranked nationally? There are 37 pressures.
Oh, I was just looking this up. It's like in the P5, it's like in like 31st or something like that?
33rd.
Yeah.
33rd.
Yeah.
Couple comparisons here. JT Tuimoloau, 37 pressures on 341 pass rush snaps. That was a 10.9% rate of, like, getting home on 10.9% of his pass rush snaps, right? Jack Sawyer, 37 on 299 snaps. So his pass rush rate getting home 12.8. Just some comparisons. Chase Young in 2019, 17.5. Joey Bosa in 2015, 20.2. Like, when a year we had no sacks, he created pressures on 20% of his pass rush snaps.
Yeah.
Nick Bosa in 2017, 19.6. So again, we're not saying you have to be that, but when we're talking about 20%, 19%, 18%, and now Jack and JT are 12.8 and 10.9, that's a step down. Okay. It is. Let's stay on the edges. What do we make of this? I've always said to me, the evaluation that I had the hardest time with and was probably the most off on in terms of individual defensive players at Ohio State was Pete Werner. I couldn't figure out if he was good or not. And then he was a 2nd round pick and, like, went to the NFL and started making plays. And I was like, he's good. What am I like? What was wrong with me? And I blame Greg Schiano and Bill Davis, which I think is fair, right?
Always blame Bill Davis. Yeah.
I feel like I'm in a similar range with JT and Jack, because when you compare them to those three guys, and with the natural layman's emphasis on sacks and getting after the quarterback, but both of these guys are such good overall football players, I have a hard time with figuring out exactly how good Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau are. So tell me, give me the Philly Billy rating. How good are they?
Like good. Like I think like solid, well-rounded defensive ends. Have both left something to be desired when it comes to pass rushing production, but we're both really good against the run. And I actually we did our player rankings. Like Jack ended up having, I think, a better season, more productive season than JT did. And also like the second that I was just looking this up on PFF to see if they broke it down that way, and they don't. I would love to know what like the game by game progression of Jack's pass rush win rate was, because by the end of the year he was on another level, I think. And I do know in the Cotton Bowl it was almost 19%. Okay. And you just track his pressures, like it goes from like it's like 1 2 0 1 2, and it's like 5 5 4 7. Like there's a noticeable uptick there with him. So I'm still pretty high on what he can be, and like we know that he's coming back. I think that JT maybe like left something to be desired based off his recruiting ranking, but I also think if you consider him less of a pure rush end and more of like a strong side and / more of like a interior player, like a Cam Hayward type, then I think he's really good.
Yeah.
But I think, we just expect, everyone knows what we expect when we see 5-star defensive end coming to Ohio State. It's a really high bar to clear. Neither one of these guys have cleared it, but I don't think that means they're bad players. I think maybe it means they were mischaracterized a little bit about what they were going to be when Ohio State signed them. But I still think both were pretty good.
All right, defensive tackles. Again, 37 pressures each for Jack and JT. Mike Hall, 29 pressures. That was 11th among interior defensive linemen in the Power 5. Tyleik Williams had 22. But Mike Hall had 29 pressures on 228 pass rush snaps. His rate is 12.7. Tyleik Williams, 22 on 333 snaps. His rate is 6.6. Talking about interior guys, right? Again, percentage time they're creating pressure. So much warranted, deserved attention on the Michigan defensive tackles. Mason Graham, 11.2 pressure rate, getting home on opportunities. Kenneth Grant, 10.4. Chris Jenkins, 8.8.
Yeah.
Mike Hall, better than all of them. I think there's a world where if Ohio State had made the playoff, like Mike Hall would have been one of the stories of the postseason. This is why I probably overdrafted him, because I had just finalized looking up this stat. It's not only about that, but in a world, Tavondre Sweat, by the way, that's his name, the Texas guy who won the best of it, 9.7. His pressure win rate. Jerzon Newton, who we said is one of the 5 best players in the North, like never comes off the field, 10.8. So Mike Hall basically had like the best pass rush win rate of like kind of anybody that mattered at defensive tackle.
Yeah.
So that's why I took him so high in our draft. As we are talking about talent, I'm really thinking, I think I'm talking about like splash plays, because I do think offensive line, I'm not. Offensive line, I'm talking about like do your job. But when we're talking about receiver, when we're talking about anybody on defense, I'm talking about splash plays, because that's expected at Ohio State. And so I think like Mike Hall's splashiness was, I think, apparent to all of us as we watched it. He did not get the number of snaps as other guys. I probably think that's, related to, is he as consistent against the run and that kind of thing, right? We all agree with that. Yeah. That's why Tyleik's out there 40% more than Mike Hall. So we're not ignoring that. But I do think Mike Hall might be the best representation. Maybe Mike Hall and Denzel Burke and late season Jack Sawyer are like that's what it looks like. That is like 5-star, 4-star talent going out and doing things that normal people, normal players can't do. That's what it looks like.
Yeah.
And when you watched Ohio State I guess the defensive line, when you watched the Ohio State defensive line this year, did you think that happened enough?
No, certainly
Okay.
not. And I thought that for a number of years. Yeah.
For a number of years. So how much is this related to Larry Johnson? Because the conversation that we just had about Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau is not dissimilar to the career-long discussion about Zach Harrison, which was another guy that I had a hard time evaluating at times, who wound up being a third-round pick in the NFL, but he's not Chase Young.
Right.
Are they just not developing that next level specialness on the defensive line to the degree, or is it more about the natural talent of the Bosa's and Chase Young, and just like trying to compare anybody to them is not about anything else except that they're rare?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably somewhere in the middle, right? I don't ever want to assume that someone is going to have the rare talent of a Bosa or a Young, but I'd be lying if I said I felt like Ohio State has been maximizing its defensive line. The defensive, like it was really good this year. Like I like solid against the run. Pushed the pocket enough, just didn't get the sacks, I don't think, but that's what people want to see. They want to see those game changing kind of havoc plays. It's just they're not happening. So I don't know if that's a Larry Johnson thing or if it's something to do with the talent that they're bringing in on the front end. It's clearly, I think, probably some combination of both, but it does feel like there's something missing, because even like, and maybe this is more about the guys that were playing around them, but I feel like Ohio State was like getting that out of like a Sam Hubbard or out of a Devon Hamilton, but Devon Hamilton played with Chase Young.
I thought Tyreek Smith at his best and healthiest did that at times.
Yeah, and like out of a Draymond Jones,
Yep.
out of why am I forgetting his name? Played for the Vikings. Jalen
Cornell?
No.
Oh, Jalen Holmes. Sorry.
Jalen Holmes. Thank you. I'm going to say Jalen Hall. Like, it's not Jalen Hall. Jalen Holmes, I think, like had a little bit of that. So, and even like in the 14 national championship season, like I thought they got a little bit of that out of like Michael Bennett, and Adolphus Washington, who granted was a 5-star prospect, and they don't seem to be getting the absolute most out of everyone. Because even Mike Hall like had really good pass rush numbers, but I didn't think he was particularly good against the run.
Yeah.
So I don't know why that's happening. I don't know if that's people getting wise to Larry's techniques or what. But it's a level that I think Ohio State needs to get back to. I don't know, like, of all the things that kept them from accomplishing their goals this year, like generating more havoc along the defensive line is not super high up there for me, but it is noticeable just because it's come to be expected at Ohio State, and they've not really been able to reach that level really since Chase Young left.
I do think defensively. So I think in the end, as we continue this sort of roster building conversation, we gave Michigan so much credit for what they had 1 through 44. I do think what we just did, when you're having trouble figuring out where do I draft these guys from number 7 to 18, there is good in that. There's some real good in that because they do have a lot of good players. And I do think in terms of like depth of talent, I mean, this is crazy to say. It's like, but I don't think it's dissimilar, right, to Michigan, because that was like Michigan's best thing. They just like really had a bunch of dudes on both sides of the ball who did their thing. Very dissimilar on the offensive line, for sure.
Mm.
But then even when I think about if we were gonna mix together all the Michigan and Ohio State defenders and then have a draft based on playmaking and splash plays, would the first 3 picks be Mason Graham, Will Johnson, and Mike Sainristil from Michigan?
Maybe,
right?
Yeah.
So I do think it's almost odd. Like, I think in the end, there maybe had been a time where Ohio State's depth of talent, right, for a year or two there wasn't where it needed to be. I think especially what you saw on the defensive side of the ball, Jordan Hancock getting healthy, Davis and Igbinosun coming in as a transfer, adding a guy like Sonny Styles, 4 third-year guys on the defensive line who all got after it. I think they raised that level up. That's what they must do on the offensive line. But actually, I think they're at the point with the defense where they need a little bit more on the top end. and they just need a little bit more Malik Hooker, a little bit more Marshawn Lattimore, a little bit more Chase Young. And I think that can happen, but I also think it has to happen. And that maybe, I do think Michigan's success is more about the depth of talent, but we can't forget, so the argument I'm having with everybody, we can't forget how really good their best guys really are, that they really do have some talent on top. And I do think there's an argument that could be made that this year, the elite, I think Michigan's elite guys were maybe more elite. Again, if we drafted the 10 best players overall in that game, I think maybe we did that at some point. I mean, of course, you're going to have Marvin Harrison Jr., you're going to have Trevion Henderson, but you really think about some of the other guys you're going to put in there. There's a decent number of Michigan guys. So I think Michigan's depth of talent, Ohio State is probably there, but actually they need to be a little more elite. What a sentence. People are absolutely thinking that's ludicrous that I just said that. But if you really dig in on the way guys played across the board this year, I don't think it's ludicrous. It could be disputed. I don't think it's crazy.
No, well, it's just hard because like if you're looking for splash, I think it's true. If you're looking for just like pure defense, like their defense is awesome this year.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's hard. It's simultaneously, I agree with you, but I also feel like it's a little hard for me to ask more of them than what they did this year because they were already so good.
Ohio State.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they were great, but they could have used one more game-breaking defensive play in the Michigan game, right?
Yeah, for sure. Or a game-breaking defensive. Yeah.
Like that's all I mean.
Yeah.
But for the defense overall, it's a progression from like they were a C, now they're an A, but now you're asking them to do a little bit extra credit and get an A+ because there are other teams that are A+. So overall, was this team talented enough in 2023? Did Ohio State have enough talent in 2023? It says it right there on the bottom of the screen. Yes or no?
I think they were a touch short.
Yeah. And like the defense, yes. Did the defense have enough talent?
I think so, yeah.
And then I agree. Ask a little bit more, but I agree. The answer is yes. And the answer on offense is no. And that's primarily because of offensive line, quarterback, and receiver depth.
Yeah, and like
tight end depth.
Tight end depth, and like I guess you can fold tight end blocking in with offensive line play because the tight end blocking I think was pretty bad this year.
Okay. That's kind of a lot, actually. Kind of.
I mean, every there are question marks all over the offense outside of Marv.
And some of it is, but it actually really is like talent related. The guys they're bringing in, like on the offensive line and like what they're figuring out in the tight end room, like beyond, like Cade saved them, but then like the rest of it, like that's not the standard. It's right. Been better than that. And having like an Emeka Buka just like chilling out, like ready to help out, or having a Jackson Smith and Jigba ready, like chilling out, like ready. Oh, I got a shot to do something now. They didn't quite have that. And maybe it was because Carnell was hurt, but also that would have been asking a lot of a freshman. So I think the overall answer is no. I think the overall answer is no. And I don't know that anybody's surprised by that, but they also played Michigan to the final minute. And
like when
Michigan won the national title.
Yeah, I mean there was no perfect team this year, and certainly Ohio State wasn't. Even despite some of those flaws, they were not that far off, I think, from being where they needed to be to win a national championship in this particular season. That's always a moving target. But still, even then, they still weren't. I think they weren't quite talented enough.
For people who listened to us back in the day on the old Buckeye Talk, on the old Bad podcast, we are planning to have Ari Wasserman join us on Kings of the North next week. It will not be in this feed. It will be in the Kings of the North feed, where we will continue our overall roster building discussion by having me and Ari yell at each other. But isn't that going to be great, Bill?
I'm really looking forward to it. He's been begging me for a while to get back together with you and I. And we were going to do it like when we first started doing this at the start of the season. Like he was in town, but we kind of like missed the window to try to do something. So yeah. I'm glad we're doing it now.
Yeah, so that should be good. So again, look for that in the Kings of the North feed next week. And we also have other stuff popping in the Kings of the North feed, including like year-end wrap-up stuff, where we're doing the King of the North. That's our Northern Player of the Year. We'll have Coach of the Year, Coach of the North. Other superlatives: best game, best offense, best defense, and our Northern, all Northern final All-American team. That's out there on King of the North, so you can go find that. And again, if you like this, but you're kind of would enjoy or appreciate like a broader context where Ohio State's part of the discussion, but not the whole discussion, that's what you find on Kings of the North. For now, thanks as always to our great producer, Mike Yorostowski, for making all of this work. For Bill Landis, I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of Columbus.